Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Carleton School of Social Work Black History Committee and the Center for Studies on Poverty and Social Citizenship, we'd like to welcome you to this event, the Blackness, Queerness Beyond Borders. My name is Elijah, as Melissa mentioned, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. Truly, I'm filled with excitement to be here. Like everybody and their mamas know that I'm happy to be here. In store for this evening, we have a headline performance from the one and only Energy. And plus a fireside chat with Tyler Boyce and Debbie Owusu-Akyeeah. And we'll be closing the evening with another performance from Energy and a book giveaway. Yeah. Ooh. But before we begin with this event, we would like to start with the land acknowledgement. We pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory. We pay respects to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor the courageous leaders past, present, and future. Now with me I have, again, Debbie Owusu-Akyeeah. She is an award-winning Black feminist activist with over 8 years of local and international advocacy experience through various initiatives in the Ottawa-Gatineau region and through working at Oxfam Canada and Global Affairs Canada. She is the executive director of the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity, or also known as the CCGSD, and has been instrumental in the advancing of the rights of two-spirited LGBTQ plus youth and communities. Since taking on the role in 2020, CCGSD has grown to become one of the most influential two-spirited LGBTQ plus organizations in Canada, providing advocacy and education to schools, organizations, and communities across the country. Debbie is an accomplished community educator, activist, and social justice advocate who is driven by the mission of creating a more inclusive, equitable, and safe world for everyone. She has spoken at parliamentary standing committees and has appeared in numerous social media outlets. She has held several advocacy and policy-oriented positions in government and non-for-profit organizations. With me, I also have Tyler, who is a Kenyan and Somali Black queer public policy professional and community organizer with 9 years of advocacy and leadership experience and a deep grounding in social justice, particularly as it is informed by Black queer feminist theories and thoughts. He is also an avid hiker and is currently the executive director of the Anishnaabe Network, which is a national network connecting and supporting over 200 pride centers and two-spirited LGBTQ plus service providers across Canada. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa, Faculty of Law, where he teaches deconstruction of racism in the law. He is committed to bridging the worlds of social justice, policy, and advocacy. Welcome, both of you, tonight. You guys hold a lot of experience in the world of advocacy. I'd like to take this time, if you'll be able to, guys, to share your journey in this advocacy and activism, I mean.
Perfect. Do you want to go first?
I might.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good. It's not going to be a super stuffy conversation. Hopefully, it's going to be a conversation that you enjoy and that gets you thinking. So when you leave here, I hope that everyone kind of maybe learned maybe something new or a different way of looking at something. I think the question was around our journey in activism. But before I get to that, I just want to say big shout out to Energy. That was really beautiful. That was such a good grounding. So I walked over to the table. I know Energy and Noah and Debbie, and I told them that I walked all the way here. So it was just a really good grounding of the space. So kind of on the activism side. So I figure the reason that we're being asked this question is because so many folks in this room are probably activists yourself. There's probably some cause, something that gets your blood running, something that makes you, study for that exam because you want that piece of paper so that you can be able to go out into the world and do what needs to be done. So I guess I'll share a little bit about my journey from kind of where you're all sitting now to being the executive director of one of Canada's largest national 2S LGBTQI+ organizations. So it all kind of started with pessimism, like most things do. I guess I had finished my undergrad in conflict studies and human rights, and I just took a really good pause between my undergrad and my master's in public policy and administration, which actually went to Carleton. And Allison was one of my thesis supervisors, actually.
She's looking at you so lovingly.
Really, got me to the finish line. But kind of thinking about what it means to live a fulfilled life. And our careers are not our whole lives, all right? Remember that as you go out into the world. But it's a big chunk of your life. It's 37.5 hours. So, a week. So you want to make sure that it's worth it. So I took those, 4 years between my undergrad and my master's figuring it out. What does impact look like for me? What does a change in the world look like for me? And then the second question I ask myself is, what are you good at? And the final question I ask myself is, what brings me joy? So with those three things, it was a lot of walks, a lot of journaling, and I figured out some key lessons that I'll share with you. So the first one is build community. It's really good to be in spaces with people that inspire you. The people you keep around you are a reflection of you, but they're also a reflection that maybe you can aspire to. And the people that I keep around me are not people that look up to me, they're people that I look up to. So be really conscious of your circles. The second piece is really around keeping that hope and that possibility. Oftentimes, and this is my opinion, in activist circles, we're all young, right? We're all looking for a sense of belonging. We're all looking to feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And that can be so powerful. But sometimes it can go wrong when we forget that in those spaces, we need to be taking care of ourselves. We need to be making sure we're not burning out. We need to make sure that, that rah-rah activist that has that badass kind of persona that we expect activists to have, it's not always sustainable. So we need to be there to pick each other up. And also we need to remember that the reason that we're all together is so much more than an identity. It gets back to that point of impact that I brought out at the beginning. So don't get lost in the sauce, is I guess what Gen Z would say. But really don't get lost in the sauce. Make sure that like, you're with all these incredible people united by a common cause. Always remember that you're building something for the people that are going to be coming after you. So with that, I kind of started to try a lot of different things. When I was younger, I kind of bought into the idea that you kind of have to have a very linear idea of what you want to do. Because everyone said that. You graduated, your undergrad, Tyler, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I just said, well, I don't know you want me to make a decision for the rest of my life now? And I had no idea. So I did a lot of different things. I ran an HIV testing program for 2 years. And I really decided, the first thing I'm going to do is like be on the front lines, meeting with people. I ran 6 different HIV clinics around the Ottawa-Gatineau region for 2 years. And every day I had people coming into my office and telling me things that sometimes they're so scared to not tell anybody else. And I learned what it means to listen, and I learned what it means to show up for people when they're at their most vulnerable. I did that, and I said, okay, so now what do I want to learn? Well, I want to learn how to really develop like proper programs. So I became a programs manager. And I said, all right, now like I have like 1 or 2 staff. I'm building things, like these ideas I have in my head, like let's give it a shot and like see if I can do it. And I loved doing that. Then I realized, okay, I feel like there's a lot of people calling the shots that don't look like me. So let's they keep calling this thing policy. I didn't write one, but I'm living by them. So let's investigate. So I started working for a consulting company, and we did public policy. We worked with the Canadian Association of Lawyers. We worked with these big organizations writing reports. So I didn't just want to, I got my frontline experience, I got my like programming experience, and then I wanted to, let y'all know that can I put pen to paper? Can I sit down when it's not glamorous by myself in my bedroom, read this long report, and at the end of it understand what are the 3 things it tried to teach me? Do I agree with it? And what is my contribution to this arena of power? And policy is power. From there, I went to the government, and then I liked it. There's a lot of power, but also a lot of red tape. And I sent a text message to my good friend Debbie, and I said, "Hey, Debbie, I think the next thing I want to try out is this executive director stuff. I see you've been doing it for a year. How's that going?" And Debbie says, "All right." So Debbie just started sending me different applications. I hope I'm not embarrassing you.
Oh, no.
Okay. And I was like, no, this one doesn't like get me excited. This one doesn't get me excited. And then there was a position for the executive director of Canada's largest network of queer and trans organizations, the Enchanté Network. And I said, wow, that's somewhere where I think I can actually have an impact, where I get to work with really incredible people that I look up to. And I applied and I put my foot in it and I got the job. It wasn't smooth. And like it wasn't like smooth sailing. It was an incredible learning curve. And I think like every ED, whether you have 2, 5, 10 years of experience, will tell you like it's gonna be a learning curve. But I guess the lesson or not the lesson, but what I want to share with you, like the learning moment is that take your time, try different things, don't get comfortable, stay curious. Every time I changed careers after that 2-year mark, I asked myself, all right, what did I learn? What do I want to learn next? And this isn't the end. I'm learning so much every day. I've been the ED of the Enchanté Network for about 2 years now. And I'm going to want to learn new things in the future. But now I'm in this new position where I don't just get to jump to the next thing in my own journey, but I get to mentor people, share my experiences, and kind of build up that next ED who's coming on their own curiosity journey. So that's what I wish for all of you.
So that's so very, very impactful, I gotta say, especially for myself. I'm a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect. So I was very impacted when you said this is a learning, you're still learning as an activist, and I'm gonna carry that. Honestly, I'm gonna carry that. Debbie, I'm gonna move it on to you.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I had a lot of fun just hearing you answer that question. I think
Oh,
I
really?
yeah, both of you. And for Tyler, like Tyler mentioned, we know each other. You know, I was Tyler's hype woman to make sure that we got to this role.
Yeah.
And just learning from my peers and learning from my community has been like instrumental every day as I try to do this work, but also been instrumental in me getting to this point. And what I really enjoyed what you mentioned was discussing that policy is power. And I think even as like a young Black girl who was living in Brampton, Ontario, anyone from the GTA? No? Oh, we got a few. I think I was questioning power and policy at a young age because I was feeling its direct impacts, especially within the school systems. It was something that was very easy for me to observe and question why someone like myself was being treated a particular way and why people who looked like me were being treated a particular way. I didn't know at 9 years old how school boards worked and how, you know, that we talk about how Black students are treated. I didn't have the language at that time, but something around me, something that inspired me, encouraged me to question those things and try to push back, even at that age. That I think that curiosity, like you mentioned, that curiosity journey has always been one that I carried with me my entire life up until today. And I think a big piece of that curiosity journey and the support throughout that journey has been Black women. And I think of some of the earliest examples of activism that were accessible to me. And I'm very, very fortunate for some of the older, like racialized feminists in my life who showed me possibility, who showed me what you can do and the power you can do in questioning policy and learning about what it is. I was fortunate enough to be best friends with someone whose mother worked in the gender-based violence sector. And her mom is a Latinx or Latina feminist lesbian from El Salvador. And when I was like 10, 11, she would take us to Ottawa Dyke March. And that was my first time meeting older Black feminist women who were doing the things that I dreamt of, to be able to go to City Hall and talk about housing and how it impacts people. They were doing the work around feminism that I always knew I was one, even before I even knew how to like spell the word. And that for me let me know what was possible, but it also showed me what a community of care looked like, even at that young age. And I was invested in that. And so for those very like reasons, the direct impact of policy on me as an individual and my communities, that curiosity to push back against power, but also the beauty and the power of community of care, I carried with me my entire life, even throughout high school, where I had to actually, and I felt like I was growing, maybe more of that like rebellious phase of pushing back and questioning things, but then also being fearless and to engage in civil disobedience in some of the most like ridiculous ways, but they gave me the like foundation to continue that in university. And so really, to be honest, this institution started for real my activism journey. I got involved in student politics as soon as I walked on to this campus to visit the Women's Studies department when I was in grade 12. I walked into the Women's Studies department. I said, I'm here. I'm applying to this program. Tell me everything.
Yes.
And they said, oh, did you know there's an activism class in second year? I said, guess who's going to take it? And kind of through that, starting in the Women's Studies program here, I was a varsity athlete, by the way. I was playing rugby at the same time. And so I was playing varsity rugby, but then was also curious about what feminist activism looked like in the student movement. And it was Black feminists who were a couple of years older than me, who were leading the charge on addressing gender-based violence on this campus. One of the biggest campaigns at the time was around a student-run sexual support center. I was watching older Black femmes do that work, and through that community of care, bring me in to teach me the ropes of like what you need to know. So it's through them that I learned about kind of just co-mentorship and co-leadership and education sessions amongst young people. It was through them that I learned about the ebbs and flows and the pros and cons of engaging school administration and learning how to speak to people who don't want to hear you, speaking to power, and trying to present a cause, develop your own theory of change, and try to measure it collectively with a group of people you bring together, through other people who are supporting different causes, so learning about allyship and solidarity. And it was through them and their support that encouraged me, while I was still a varsity athlete, to work as the programming coordinator for the Women's Center here. So I was then given an opportunity through leadership to drive some really crucial change to ensure that queer, Black, and other marginalized students had a safe space where they can receive services, but then also engage in conversations that they may not be able to in their classrooms. And so one of my highlights was creating a space for Black students in the STEMs to learn about feminist theory that they weren't getting in classrooms. So I actually remember us printing our course packs to give to our comrades who were in the STEMs and bringing them in for different consciousness raising conversations that we were having and talking about the issues that we were dealing with here as students, and then using that to drive change that's policy based, that was being driven by the top, by people who were getting paid by our tuition dollars, and trying to disrupt what we felt was bad policy at this level. And then on top of that, doing that with other activists and student leaders from across the country through mechanisms like the Canadian Federation of Students. And so I mention that because my advice to you folks is that this institution, spaces that bring young people together, are meant to give you those skills. It's meant to train you to be activists. I am a big advocate of the student activism that you learn here, the opportunity to learn how to speak to power, to talk to journalists. And I know there's journalism students here, so I actually want to shout them out. If it wasn't for their projects, I would not have learned how to speak to media, how to take complex issues and condense them to 3 key talking points so that I'm bringing other people into our cause in a way that doesn't seem like we're condescending or we're talking down to folks. So thank you, Carleton's journalism program. But then also learning how to work across generations. So I talk about the work that we did with faculty and the faculty unions to be able to drive certain causes around graduate student mental health and other things like supporting international students, etc. At some point, I ran for student politics. I was president of the Graduate Student Association. That's not important. What really is important is that there are the tools to teach you to do activism and advocacy right here, and to take advantage of it. Because if I didn't, I don't think I would have gotten the opportunity to test these things and to fail, because there's a lot of failure that comes. You learn through making mistakes that have given me the opportunity to kind of question many of the things I've done even after school. And so I did my graduate studies here at Carleton. So where Tyler did public policy, I did foreign policy. So I'm a proud alumni of the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs, where I studied international development policy. And the reason why I chose to do that is that I felt the people who were making policy around international development didn't come from the areas that were being impacted by those policies. And I felt that it was important, even for those of us who are first generation born in Western countries, to be involved and to recognize the importance of diaspora when it comes to informing international development. And it was through there that I went to go work in the public service. I worked at Global Affairs Canada, and very similar to Tyler, I was like, for some reason, I feel contained and constrained. I was fortunate enough to work within the Gender Equality Bureau, which is exactly what I wanted. I felt like I was putting everything I learned into practice, but I felt like that curiosity only got me so far. And I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to take the same kind of international development passion that I had to an NGO, Oxfam Canada, where it gave me my first opportunity to do advocacy as a campaigner. So I was working in campaigns with a brilliant feminist policy team. And that's where I was just like, here we go. I was able to take everything, the policy knowledge, the opportunities to talk to communities on the ground, youth engagement, and really take, again, complex policy issues, present them in a way that's accessible for the people to mobilize power. And one of the best campaigns I ever did, where I created a bed in the middle of downtown Toronto to kind of simulate the experiences of women who work as housekeepers in the hotel industry, was such an awesome opportunity to be able to do a stunt like that publicly, to engage people on a very interesting policy issue, which is wage disparity and its gendered impacts and how it creates the poverty situation that we're in globally. I also, too, at the same time, as exciting as it was, still felt I was constrained. And in early 2020, when the world shifted completely 180 due to a pandemic, the opportunity to apply as an executive director came up. And I was like, oh no, I'm too young. I was like, I'm 28. Like, I don't think this is for me. I think the images I had of executive directors were older and white women. And so I was just like, that's not me yet. I'm just gonna wait 20 years. Let me just continue to do this thing. And it was through community where someone said, I actually think you should apply. Just try it. And I was like, okay. So I did it. And it wasn't for no reason. I was very passionate about the mission of the organization, and I knew the history of the organization as well. So I knew that somebody's leadership on the right direction can make this organization and take it to the place it deserves to be. And so I applied and I got it. And at 28 years old in July 2020, I became the executive director of the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity. And I was uncomfortable the entire time starting this role. But I think it was in that feeling of being uncomfortable, of that imposter syndrome, that forced me to seek out, again, my community of care to learn. It was through speaking to other Black people who work in the nonprofit industry about what their lessons. And, you hear all these stories about Black women in the nonprofit sector and how much sometimes they eat us alive. And some people might have seen that infographic. It's called The Problem of the Black Woman in the Nonprofit Sector. It starts off with her entering. There's a honeymoon phase. She questions policies. The board of directors starts to blame her, and then she leaves. And it often is a thing that I went in bracing myself for, but I was very fortunate that there were people who were like, we got you. Whether it's a template that you need, or if it's literally people you want showing up in a meeting, we got you. And I'm forever grateful, because that inspired me, especially as there were a number of Black executive directors who were getting roles here in the Ottawa area, to kind of just create like an informal network where we were just connecting each other to know like, hey, I got your back. What do you need? You need a template for timesheets? Here's the one that I'm using. Oh, you need some language on HR policy? Here's something. And that was needed because this work is not easy. It's exhausting and it impacts our mental health. But in order for us to do this work as advocates and activists, we need to practice self-preservation. I am not perfect at it, but it is a principle I try to live by, because I think it makes me a better advocate. And if I'm taking care of myself, I'm best prepared to show up for the communities that I serve. And so through all this to say, in terms of like lessons to take, it's been a long journey of me questioning how policy impacts me as an individual and the communities that I exist in. It is through Black women that I've learned that I can take these leadership roles and that I can gain the skills and the tools to be a better advocate. And it's through those same people that I learned to pass down those same skills to younger generations of Black activists who were coming after me. And I'm very proud that when I left many of the roles that I had, that I've always had that in mind, that I give a skill to someone so that they can take with them to another role, that I mentor someone who asked me, that I make time for those people. Those things have been really crucial for me, and it continues to be crucial now that I'm in this role, where I'm making the cognitive decision to make sure that I'm creating a space where young Black activists in particular feel like they can like work with my organization and learn skills. And I tell this to like a lot of my senior leaders, I'm going to mentor you so that you can take my job. And sometimes it shocks them. And I'm like, no, even if you don't even take this role, I want you to be prepared for whatever you do. And so that like co-mentorship is so key and important. And like even just teaching them the lesson of being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you learn so much when you lean into those feelings. And so that's a bit about my journey. It has not been an easy one, but I'm fortunate for the opportunities that it's given me, because I got to do cool things like talk to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your stories. Very interesting journey that you have into activism. I noticed that in your stories, a big driving factors into your guys' activism is your identities. So I'm wondering, how do you devote your energy into certain issues, given your intersectional identities?
So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, give me a second. Yeah, give me a second. I'm letting it.
Yeah, let it marinate. Let it marinate.
Can you repeat it again?
Yeah, so like, how do you devote your energy to certain issues in your activism, given your intersectional identities?
Really, that's a good question. Okay. So I think for me, it's not completely driven by just like my identity. I think it's more driven on how systems impact me as a result of my identity. So it's more of, I would never say my activism is solely because I'm a Black woman navigating the world. It's because this world is based on the foundation of like misogynoir, which is anti-Black racism, that shows up in housing, that shows up in education, that shows up in so many different institutions that are impact our lives. And that's why I'm driven to maybe tackle certain policy issues, is because I know they don't impact human beings in the society the same way. And that's the problem. And as a result of that, if we want to create good policies, we need to keep that in mind so that we, I know Tyler and I talk about this all the time, like thinking of the most marginalized folks when you're developing policy, because if you don't, if you're only thinking of the major 80%, you're actively creating those margins that create problems for folks. So that's why I always talk about not doing bad policy, and being bold is a good way to do so. And so I think that's like the driving factor for me. It's not necessarily my identities itself, but it's the systems that inform the vulnerability as a result of what has been prescribed on me.
Very good point.
if I could add to it too.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I like how you kind of framed it like in terms of like a systems kind of like conversation. For me, I think like I shared earlier, asking yourself one of those key questions, and one of them was, what are you good at? What are you best equipped to do? And I think that that can mean a lot of different things for different people. But I know for me personally, it was really about not seeing a lot of work in the world where Black people were at the center. Not being able to do that work. And I remember I was in undergrad at U of O, and it was the first time in one of my classes that I got a report, and it was based on the housing outcomes of Black people in Ontario. And it was the first time in my third year of undergrad that I actually believed and saw that you could do this, all these amazing skills we're so lucky to learn in Canada could be applied towards addressing some of the really messed up inequities facing people who look like me all across this country. So I made a very conscious decision that I was going to make sure that there was never going to be another Tyler Boyce in his first, second year in high school, whatever, feeling as if doing work to make the world a better place for Black folks wasn't a possibility. That it wasn't somewhere that we could put our energy. So I continued doing that work. I think, because to make it practical for folks, like start locally in your community, kind of build out your community and try to don't virtue signal, like actually take those virtues and those values and put them into action. It can be on a small scale, a big scale, it doesn't matter, but like see if you got what it takes. That's kind of like how I approach everything, even my day-to-day job. Like, do you got what it takes? Like, can you do it? Like, just ask yourself. And like Debbie said, like lean into that like feeling of being uncomfortable. The first thing I did was I organized with other Black, queer, and trans folks in the city, and we said, hey, like we don't really have a place like to celebrate joy. All of these talks around, and this is around Tent City in Toronto, this is around like Black Lives Matter 2016, and we were like, let's create some space. So we started Dark and Fruity. It was just Black, queer, and trans folks in the city of Ottawa with on the side of our desk getting together and having tea or talking and chilling and saying, you know what, we're gonna like create parties for Black, queer, and trans folks in this city. And I learned so much from that experience. I learned that you need to get a bylaw from the city to roll up in a park. I learned that you need a permit if you actually want to drink and stuff. I learned that if you want to like go and like rent out a space, it's way easier than you think it is. You just go and like tell your story. Be like, hey, I want to do this here. You have a space. I'm bringing people. You can keep the money from like maybe 15% of the tickets. The rest of the ticket sales are going to be donated to this cause that's important to us. We donated all the money, it was almost $1,000 from one of our events to the Haringey Tenants Coalition because so many Black folks are being evicted from their houses in Ottawa because of gentrification. I learned about what it means to work in a group. I don't know how to create a graphic design. Someone else did. I don't own a DJ controller. Someone else had one. Like we brought all our skills together and were able to do something. And it was a huge confidence booster because I was like, all right, like my identity, these folks kind of share that identity. We wanted to do something. Then I said, let's do it. Let's do it bigger. So then I went on and I said, okay, I was in the HIV world at the time, and it was a lot of white gay men creating the rules for everybody. And I said, well, that's not good. So I'm gonna do something about that. So I started off by being like the disruptor, you know, you stand up and you say, I read this report and I saw this, this, and that. And I was getting like a lot of head nods and it was a lot of energy. So I said, okay, these spaces are not for me. So I just collected all the other Black folks and we started the BGMN, Black Gay Men's Network of Toronto, our Black Gay Men's Network of Ontario, connecting Black gay men from all across the province on key policy issues and to create community with one another. Now it's a registered nonprofit. Then now it's enchanté, so I don't, I have resources. The first thing I said that I was gonna do is I was gonna create national spaces for Black, queer, and trans folks. So at the announcement of Canada's first ever action plan, 2S LGBTQI+ action plan in October, I stood there with the Prime Minister, with the Minister for Women and Gender and Equality and Youth, and several other ministers. They announced the action plan, and they also announced the successful application to my organization to lay the foundation for Canada's first ever Black 2S LGBTQI+ organization. Right now, that's what we're working towards. We have more than, and that work just comes from what I hope you take from it is like, start small, build your confidence, build with people who you got love for in your community, people that you can be vulnerable with and that you don't have to show up and like puff your chest out and act like you know everything. And then once you did that, do something else and then do it again, bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the way to do it. I think it's Ronaldo Walcott who says when you enter an institution, make sure that that institution is not the same from the moment you entered it to the moment that you exit it. What did you create? What did you do? What did you change? Ask yourselves those questions. And when it comes to your identity, it definitely motivates me to make sure that these spaces exist for Black, queer, and trans folks. But my identity is so intrinsically linked to the systems that Debbie was talking about. It's linked to racism, it's linked to ableism, it's linked to colonization. So when we're talking about the Black queer identity, we're at the same time talking about those intentional solidarity partnerships that need to be made. Black and Indigenous folks have so much to learn from each other in the ways that we've been displaced, in the ways that we continually resist and find joy in the work that we're doing. So understanding that a Black queer identity at the same time is a deep and a very different kind of relationship with different groups that are in the struggle together.
Love that response. Love the quote, by the way, that you shared. Very powerful. I would like to shift our gears into to focus on students who are just beginning their activism journey. What would you say would be their first steps into addressing some of the issues that are affecting their communities?
I feel like I answered that, so.
Okay, yeah. I touched a bit about this, and I think Tyler did as well, around starting small. And the reason why I keep talking about this, being in university and these spaces being where you get those skills and start to use those skills in activism, you folks are already organized. Like, prime example, all of you folks are here. Like, these are contacts, and this is a community that you can build. If you're part of a student club, that's a community that you can start building change with. If you are with a study group, for example, and you're noticing that something is really, there's an issue with regards to an approach that a professor is trying to get you folks to use that is probably racist, homophobic, or something, you folks are already organized. And I think that's why student activism is such an easy starting point, is because you folks are already connected and you can start small. It doesn't have to be this grandiose, big idea of like flipping the institution of Carleton University on its head. I wish that was the case, but you need to start, there's baby steps, right? And so don't be afraid to start where you're already at. And to start small and to really think about those folks that you brought together and what connects you, what binds you together. What are those things that you're like, oh, I'm also facing this barrier. Are you facing it? Where can we start? One thing that was super useful for me was building connections with the Graduate Student Association when I was in undergrad. Not to say that graduate students know everything, but many of them who are still finishing their PhD have been around for a while. And they can also tell you about the things that they've experienced and kind of also give you tips and access to things and even basic resources. If you need to, because sometimes that came up when I was an undergrad, take that group of folks that you got together with and actually do something on campus to bring attention to things. It's going to require those resources. So very similar to what Tyler mentioning, someone with a DJ like desktop or someone who does graphic design, you'd be surprised the resources that you have here. So if you need a megaphone, someone has them on campus. If you need even a donation, going to the unions that are here, ensure that they'd be able to cut a check possibly. If you need someone to donate food, even just to bring folks together to talk about issues, those resources are also accessible to you here on this campus, right? And so start small, recognize that you can build communities where you're at, find those issues that you're passionate about, but not being afraid to also look around to see who also has similar causes that overlap that you can bring into your cause as well.
Could I add one thing? Mm-hmm. If I could add just like one thing, I think it's also about like figuring out like the vibe of who you're organizing with. I think a lot of times like in the spaces I've seen like fall apart sometimes are spaces like where we're not all honest from the jump about what we're trying to do and how we're approaching the issue. So if you ever sort of experience that in circles that you're organizing in, don't feel like it's just you or that it's like a weird thing or it has something to do with like the group. You can approach a singular issue from 1,000 different ways. So if you are like organizing around an issue, I think like a good example is kind of like right now we're experiencing like rising, like unprecedented rises in hate crimes against queer and trans communities. We're seeing something as simple as like drag story time being just like bombarded with like really, really violent, kind of scary groups of people and their children there. And like, I think, you know, as there are many organizations that are pushing back against this, the CCGSD, the El Shante Network, countless other organizations, the key question, like when you're organizing on this level or you're organizing on any other level, is to look to the people beside you and ask, how are we coming at this? What do we want to do? Are we trying to flip the system on its head? Are we trying to speak to people that are convinced? Are we trying to speak to people that might be on the fence? Are we trying to speak to people that are the ones holding the signs and the protesters? Like, what are we trying to do? Would just be like a key message, like to add on to like getting together and organizing yourselves, but also like be vulnerable in those like organizing spaces about what you want to see. And if you can't be vulnerable in a space and you're organizing with people, that's not a space for you to be organizing in.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. A pattern that I noticed between both of your responses is this idea of allyship. Am I correct? Would you say that's fair to say? Like, I like connecting when we connect with different organizations, sharing resources. I feel like in activism, the world of activism is allyship is very essential, but a lot of times it can go wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah, with like performative activism and all that stuff. But I wanted to know, in terms of allyship, how do you think um, different individuals or different communities can go about it? What is like the most ethical way people can be the best ally they can be for different communities, addressing different issues?
Um, so I think like, we've talked so much about like coalition building. What does it mean to find those like key partnerships to work towards a common goal? And that's super, super powerful. And I think your question is about, allyship. So maybe if you're not from a particular group, sort of like showing up as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're all in Ottawa. There has been a lot of conversations in this city around Ottawa Police Services. There is a housing crisis, but at the same time, we're seeing the police budget get higher and higher and higher and higher. And some of the reasons that are being used to justify those increases are the reasons that should really be the opposite. I've heard arguments to increase the police budget because of the pandemic and the convoy. Completely devoid of how the police failed to show up for the citizens of this city during the occupation. So what does it mean now for us to all organize? There's so many people in this room with like visible and invisible differences, and we're all going to navigate kind of working towards that goal of pushing city council to resource the needs of the community, to imagine us not as dangerous citizens that can fall into anarchy and a really Hobbesian, negative, pessimistic view on human nature. Pushing people to see us as a collective of folks that are there to lean on each other. I know that in this room, I don't know a single person here, but if I leave my phone on this table and I walk out that door, I know that one of you is going to bring it back and none of you is going to take it. We shouldn't be seeing people and like through the lens of criminality. We don't deserve it. So what does it mean for us to show up for each other, right? There are different groups right now organizing around the police in Ottawa. I know that some of those groups believe in, civil disobedience in the way of showing up to City Hall all together, shouting at a City Hall meeting, or blocking the door so that no one can leave. And protest is by definition the disruption of ordinary life. It can be incredibly powerful in the fight for human rights. Protesting, fighting for our rights shouldn't be a polite endeavor. I know that as a Black man, me protesting in that way is going to be received with a very high level of danger compared to maybe a white woman who's going to go and do the exact same thing. So in the ways that we organize and that we do allyship, it's so much less about that performative allyship that you talked about, just like, oh yeah, I think that's awful too. But it's also in the ways that we understand how race, class, and sex really, and gender really play into the ways in which we can all show up in the struggle together. So my kind of like challenge to you is that as you move in these spaces, ask yourselves, am I being conscious of the ways in which I show up in spaces? And that goes for all of us. No one is immune. No one is immune from not being able to like reflect on how they present in a space by virtue of their identity. I know that I'm like a queer Black guy. I'm also not a trans person. And when I'm in those spaces with trans people, what's the most important thing for me to do? The most important thing for me is to listen and ask, how can I show up in this movement building in a way that is supportive of what you're trying to do? And that's going to look a lot differently. So like, I think the main thing is really around humility and self-awareness.
Oh, Tyler said everything I wanted to say, even down to referencing Hobbes. You're the philosopher. Like, yes. And as someone who's very deeply involved in the Ottawa People's Commission on the trucker convoy, thank you for bringing that up, especially with regards to some hypocrisy with regards to policing in the city. I think just one thing I would add, when I talk about allyship, I like to challenge folks to kind of think about it as, instead of being like, how can I be an ally, and thinking about how you can be a co-conspirator. There's a lot more that direct action, the humility, and that self-awareness that I think being a co-conspirator does, as opposed to allyship, which I think many people have kind of derooted the word to just be something that you slap on your like Instagram bio instead of actually doing something. And I think a big piece of that co-conspirator component, and I think the analogy that you use with regards to you engaging in a particular type of action that would be met differently because of just who you are, means that sometimes when we listen to the communities that we are trying to be in solidarity with, it might require like putting yourself in danger. And I don't mean this in like in the like being in front of a moving truck kind of way, but also recognizing what you might lose, the things you might lose as a result of the privilege that you own, and showing up for that community. Being a co-conspirator isn't supposed to be like fun work. It's not supposed to be rainbows and sunshine. It will also probably involve you dealing with blowback, or people calling you out, or having particular slurs put on you because you were occupying that space by following the leadership of the community you're trying to serve. But that's part of it. And so you need to recognize that as well and ask yourself, am I willing to also do this, recognizing I will lose something tied to privilege? If that's a yes, that's like the first step. The second step is actually listening to that community and like really being guided by their leadership for where they want you to show up. So very similar, if trans femmes in my community are like, Debbie, we think it's best for you, because you're a cis woman, to do a particular thing. It's like, yep. And if it means a bunch of TERFs are going to flood my emails, my Twitter DMs, etc., that's nothing, because that's zero compared to what my trans femme colleagues and sisters have to deal with. So like those are the things that are important to me when it comes to like showing up as an ally or a co-conspirator. It's being able to recognize that I too am going to lose things, but that's nothing in comparison to the folks that I'm trying to show up in solidarity with.
Wow. I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of great points from the both of you, honestly. I'm curious though, like I want to take it a step further. Like we've been talking about allyship and activism within the national scale. I'm curious to see what is like the differences and similarities with activism and allyship more in the international sphere. If you,
It's a good question, and I perk up only because I think the international activism side brings me a lot of joy. One of the reasons why I studied foreign affairs and foreign policy. Tyler mentioned that he's Somali Kenyan. I'm Ghanaian, and I don't think I can do this work without acknowledging the fact that my experience is transnational. So my experiences as a Black queer woman in Canada, and the things that I deal with here and the systems that collide and impact me also impact me across borders, and that there's that history of colonialism that has impacted Ghana, and the impacts of that also impact me here. And that international solidarity work, I think, is really key, especially when it comes to some of the 2S LGBTQ activism that I'm most passionate about. What's happening in Canada, obviously, is super key. It drives my day-to-day work, but I think in my heart and in my soul, I am driven by making sure that the LGBTQ and human rights activists in my home country have the support and resources that they need. And so, to be completely honest, talking about being a co-conspirator, using my leadership role here in Canada to make sure that there's resources back home for the people who are doing that frontline work, that I think is important and that we often lose because we've somehow, many of us bought into this idea that for African or Black LGBTQ people, we need to be in the West in order for us to be able to live all of our identities fully, when there's a lot of decolonial work. That's what I think the LGBTQ work happening back home is decolonial. that needs to be invested in. And so if it means that I'm having conversations with, the Minister of Foreign Affairs on human rights issues, I will actually use my lived experience as a Ghanaian Canadian to talk about the issues that are happening in my home country, including a very scary bill that was introduced by the opposition party to criminalize not only same-sex acts, but identity. And today, a very similar bill got passed super quickly in Uganda. And the language and the rhetoric being used by the politicians in that country are identical to the bigots here that we are in opposition to. And so, again, it's all transnational, it's all connected, and that's important for us to talk about when we're living in a highly globalized world. And I think people who live in the diaspora are best positioned to talk about that, because we know what happens in our home countries absolutely impact us here. And so, I'm passionate about these things. There's things that are happening, but I think if there's one message I would say is that it's all connected. So the activist work that you're going to be doing here, don't lose sight of the global components to it, and then recognize that if you're at a point that you can take your solidarity work internationally, you absolutely can. I find the greatest joy doing that solidarity work with activists around the world. It means a lot to me. I'm excited about it. There are interesting conversations and interesting work that's happening there, and there's so much to be learned from those folks doing that work around the world as well.
I think that was a beautiful overview. And I think that, Debbie is being very modest. When Debbie says that she uses the resources that she has here in Canada to support those activists on the ground in her home country, you have a current project right now that's literally working with an organization in Ghana.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what's important for us is to make sure that that kind of work doesn't only happen when there are leaders like Debbie that are thinking in that way. We have a very open democracy in Canada. So being able to ask, if you say something, if you put pressure on an organization or on a politician, you're likely going to get what you want and what you're advocating for if you do it well. So making sure that we're holding executive directors who run organizations in Canada with budgets way bigger than me and Debbie, who aren't doing this work, to be able to either, put their money where their rhetoric is and be doing the exact same kind of solidarity work transnationally. And that's a lot more than having an event on an international day of significance. It also is exactly the kind of work. It's also no shade to this event, but also it's also putting the resources into the hands of the activists that, Debbie and I put ourselves as spokespeople for organizations, and we get a lot of backlash for it. That's nothing compared to folks that are doing this work in different contexts. So making sure that they're equipped with the resources to put food on the table after putting their livelihood, after putting their well-being on the table in pursuit of freedom for their communities.
I was just wondering if there's any last advice you would to give our audience and students who are watching this fireside chat. Is there any last advice that you would give to anybody who's starting this journey into activism? Take time to marinate that.
It's a really good question to advise. I have it. Okay. I have a huge family. I'm one of 7 brothers. I'm second oldest. So and some of them are the same age as or at the same point in university as you guys. I think the biggest advice and that I would give is never underestimate how far a first step can take you. If you do something, if you just put something out there, there's this culture around us that gets us all to believe that if you just do it, it's gonna fail, it's not gonna work out, it's gonna be too much work, it's not worth it, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's so weird how we've all internalized that, when the truth is exactly the opposite. Put it out there, do it, and you'll be so shocked by how quickly your little idea is gonna grow into something real in the world.
That's beautiful. I like that. I think if there's any advice, and I'm trying to think back to when I was here as a student, I think don't be afraid to pivot, because sometimes that will happen. You probably started your journey at Carleton thinking at the end of my 4 years, or 6 if you were me, and I'm that it's going to look like this thing. Things change. I came in thinking that I was going to do something completely different than I'm doing now. I actually didn't think I was going to be an executive director when I was 18 and I moved here from Brampton. That's okay. That is absolutely okay, because I think it's through those pivots, and Tyler and I spoke about the pivots we've made in our career, where some of the greatest opportunity lies in front of you. If I didn't decide to leave what my parents, my Ghanaian parents, would have felt was a comfortable, good job at a reputable NGO, to move into what they would be like gay work, because they're like, it's a gay organization, what are you doing? For them, they're like, there's a lot of risks for a variety of reasons. If I didn't make that pivot, I wouldn't have the opportunities to drive the changes I'm able to do right now. Those pivots are powerful. And so don't hesitate to like do those things, to realize, oh, okay, it's not going to look like this, but that's okay, because that journey that you took, that little sidestep, there's going to be awesome things lying ahead of you. So do it.
My goodness. Honestly, I'm just taken back. Like, your advice, I'm gonna carry that within, I'm not even going into activism, but I feel like I want to be an activist now. So thank you both for coming in tonight and sharing your journey, your time, your everything, honestly, to all of us here tonight. We, on behalf of everybody here today, we deeply appreciate your time and sharing what you have done for the community. And thank you. Thank you.
And thank all of you.
Thank you.